Welcome to The Logic of Generosity, the podcast for bold nonprofit leaders who refuse to settle for ordinary. Here, we cut through the noise with unfiltered insights from fundraising experts designed to spark bigger gifts, deeper donor connections, and a brighter future for your mission. Let's dive in.
Well, this episode is brought to you by Pleiades Nonprofit Advisors, and we now offer database services from a certified Blackbaud Razor's Edge, NXT, and Network Plus database administrator. Less friction means more mission. When your data's a mess, your message misses. When it flows clearly, your mission gains momentum. At Pleiades, we design clarity. We bring order to chaos so that your team can focus on what matters. Identifying interested donors, building meaningful donor relationships, and moving faster with confidence. Relevance begins with clean data, the right message, right person, right time. But that only happens when your data is accurate, useful, and accessible. Our three essentials are data cleanup, clear vision, that's going to be the result. No more duplicates, no more undeliverables, no more wasted time. We'll standardize names, emails, and addresses so that your outreach works the first time, every time. We also offer CRM migration and setup, which allows for a smooth, thoughtful transition. Switching systems should not feel like skydiving without a parachute. We precisely carry your donor history, we validate every field, and we're going to map everything carefully so nothing is lost and nothing breaks along the way. The third thing we offer is staff training, empowered people, smarter decisions. It's not enough to have a better tool. Your people need to know how to use it. We train your team, we customize your protocols, and we build their confidence to own the system from day one. We also offer other items like custom reporting, ongoing CRM support, and workflow design. But finally, you've got a system that works. No more chasing reports, no more apologies for messy data, just a clean, functional, mission-aligned CRM environment designed to help your people do their best work. Because when data works, your mission moves. Javier and Cassie Reyes, I am so excited about doing this today with you, and for a number of reasons. First, because we're friends and we talk literally way too often, but I love that. And I love just being able to connect on so many different things. And it's been fun to be able to see so many interactions that have taken place, just not only between us, but as a result, things have just kind of grown out of this. You sold my house. I mean, we're that close. So anyways, Cassie, Javier, nice to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
I think it would be good to give our audience a little bit of background and to be able to share what it is that you guys do. Obviously, you're realtors. We know that you're in that space, but you have also done some pretty unique things within your business. And I think it would be a good idea if you just shared a little bit about that.
Sure. You want to take that? So Javier and I have been working together as realtors for about 14 years now. And our business has evolved from the traditional real estate to now putting a large focus on helping foundations sell their real estate when they get a donation. And we cover pretty much all of Southern California and Arizona as well in the Phoenix area. And I would say our business now is probably about 50-50, right? With traditional people buying and selling real estate, referring their friends and family to us versus the foundation work that we've been doing.
Do you guys get involved with probate sales or probate situations where the court is saying, no, look, you know what, this needs to be sold, and what do you find yourselves?
Yeah.
The probate sales would come under more on the trust administration aspect of our business. So trust administration and foundation sales are they're cousins, because a lot of times the properties are coming out of a trust.
Yeah.
I mean, not all the time, but most of the time they're coming out of a trust that's going to be donated to a particular nonprofit. So the trust administration side can also have a probate component if there was a property that was funded into the trust incorrectly and it has to be probated.
Yeah, so we do quite a bit of probate and just trust sales in general. And part of the way that we got into the foundation world was through an attorney that we used to work with. And he was a trust and estates attorney. He would refer us his clients that either needed to go through probate on their family's property, or if they had come to him before and had a trust, if they were selling after someone had passed away out of the trust, we would help him. And he ended up going and joining a nonprofit and kind of took us with him, where we started selling for that nonprofit. And that's kind of how it trickled from traditional real estate to probate real estate to then foundation donation real estate.
And I'm assuming that we're talking about Matt.
Yes.
But I'm curious, especially in the probate world, things get a little bit nasty. Things get a little bit crazy, if not hair-raising, when wills get contested or families come out of the woodwork. And it's like, oh, I had no idea you were a family member. Welcome to the family,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. I'm just curious. I mean, do you have any stories that you've seen within that space? Just getting right into the thick of this because I think it's good for folks to be able to kind of hear what could possibly go wrong in
Mhm.
probate world where it affects maybe such a large asset like real estate.
Mhm. Well, there's one sale in particular that I always think about when we're talking to people about the importance of having an estate plan. Is we sold a house in Fullerton about 5 years ago, and it was a probate sale, and there were 20 beneficiaries that were to be paid from the sale of the property. And the story was that the woman who had owned the home and passed away was never married, didn't have children. She just had a very large extended family of siblings and nieces and nephews. So there's 20 people that now, in the hierarchy of how probate works, there were no immediate family members. So it went down her family tree and across. And so there were 20 people sitting around waiting for this house to sell, and the house was only about $400,000. So they're
Okay.
all sitting there waiting to cut the pie up into these little slivers. And in the meantime, no one wanted to lift a finger to help do anything. So all of the work was left for one of the woman's nieces, who lived 2 hours away and spent probably 2 years of her life dealing with this property, all of these things that were left undone. And of course, this woman who passed away, she had no idea that was going to happen when she passed away, whether it was she just didn't understand the process or she didn't care. But it was chaos trying to deal with that estate just because of how many people were involved, the lack of money, so they couldn't afford to really do anything. So the house was it was a hoarder situation. It was
Oh.
the house was moldy.
Oh.
We kind of
All in
felt,
the roof.
yeah, it had a giant hole in the roof, and it
Oh
was a very
no.
rainy season that year. So it's just things like that where we see the family dynamics of what happens afterwards, and it's just a lot of drama and chaos that can be avoided for not a whole lot of money
Yeah.
to
Did
pay
she
for
pass
plan.
away intestate? Did she
Yep.
have no will
Yeah.
at all? So
Nothing.
probate courts of California just said this is how it's going to roll. And
Yep.
people who have probably had zero contact with the donor, if they
Yeah.
weren't even lifting a finger to get money
Yeah.
from the donor, or from the decedent, then oh my gosh, how probably
Yeah.
uninvolved they were with her life as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows? She may have not had contact or not wanted
Right.
five of those people to get anything, but the California doesn't care, so they got the money regardless.
Yeah, no, it's a good plea for make a will. By the way, make a
Make a
will this next month. So,
yeah.
uh, okay, well, no, that's crazy. And I would imagine you've seen story after story after story that kind of ring similarly
Mm-hmm.
to those individuals, and even those who have maybe have like a will-based plan. You're assuming that the family, is all in alignment and okay,
Yep.
but oh boy, sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, so as we get into our session today, I just want to kind of give a real quick big picture. Real estate gifts are obviously going to be huge in the nonprofit sector. They're probably in many cases the largest asset that can possibly be donated. There are others, but this is one of the big ones, and everybody has, some sort of investment in real estate. Not everybody, but a lot of people do. There's going to be a lot of considerations to take, especially when we talk about the gifting of real estate. But today is a little bit more of a focus on the receiving of real estate and the side of how things can kind of get muddy and things can
Mm-hmm.
get really sticky, and that there are going to be instances where a nonprofit should probably not receive the property but turn around and run and do
Yeah.
whatever they can to avoid maybe receiving that. And there's going to be some things that we're going to be talking about today in our time together to kind of walk through what could possibly go wrong in a real estate transaction. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some trends that we're seeing as well. So let's get into it. Um, I'm going to go ahead and just touch on this real quickly. I mean, this is probably not even up to date as it was maybe last
Mm-hmm.
year. I know that the real estate market is kind of a little iffy right now in a lot of spots and around the country. I don't know if you're seeing the same in California or Arizona. Maybe those areas might be a little bit more hotspot in nature. Would you say that's the case, by the way?
It depends on the area, because each market is a collection of multiple micro markets. So you can have one community that's doing exceptionally well, that has short days on market, whereas then you have a community of within a mile or 2 miles that's taking 120 days to sell a house in there. So it really just depends on, it depends on price point. Um, I mean, to give you an example, like in the Phoenix area, 1 million and under is a bit of a challenging market, but 1 million and above has some resiliency and it's doing well. Whereas in California, well, there's not a whole lot under 1 million, but that is at 1 million does sell fairly quickly, but there's some we have pushback of over 3 million, and that's due to insurance issues. So you can't, I don't like to ever, when someone asks how's the market, I go, it really just depends on which area and really what asset class. Is it a single family home? Is it a condominium? Is it a fourplex? Or is it a duplex? What really, but all in all, the insurance is probably the biggest roadblock in all these markets right now going forward, because that's going to really affect the values.
I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the insurance issue in just a bit, because I want to come back to that and spend a little time there because I think it's going to be a big issue to talk through. That said, let's talk a little bit about, I don't know if these figures are up to date. This is from like, I want to say November of 2024. And these are median costs for homes. Obviously, it may not necessarily reflect the types of homes that you guys are working with, but are we far off on this, or what are your thoughts?
I don't think so.
LA is a little low, San Diego's a little low, Maricopa County's pretty much about right. I think
Okay.
we're Clark County, about right. I'm not very familiar with Sacramento or San Mateo
Okay.
from Monterey.
Yeah,
I
the
mean, I don't know the number.
Bay Area is just crazy. That's best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're just crazy. Okay, so I think it's probably good to talk a little bit about, look, for a real estate gift, it can be unbelievable. It can be absolutely transformative. However, there's going to be a number of things that we're going to want to talk about as it relates to receiving a real estate gift. But one of the questions that I think some people are a little bit hesitant to ask is they just make the assumption that people want to hold on to their properties indefinitely. And it's like, no, I want to just hold on to this asset. It's a real important asset for us, which it is, and I get that. It's worth a lot. But why would somebody, and what would cause somebody to say, you know what, I want out of this real estate stuff. Maybe it's not even their primary residence, but maybe it's like something else. Can you share a little bit about why maybe somebody is interested in moving away from owning real estate?
You could see it happen. Let's just say grandma and grandpa 30 years ago started buying properties. One or two, every couple of years. And over a 20, 25 year cycle, now they have 10 properties
Yeah.
and the kids are gone. They've moved cross country. They're somewhere else. Um, the challenge for a lot of these people now are the maintenance cost, the insurance cost, uh, just keeping up with everything. And then, if you're older, yeah, sure, you like the mail money. More times than not, if it's a rental property, they're renting it below market rent just to keep the tenant in there. They're not being aggressive on the rents, but also the maintenance. There's a lot of deferred maintenance. We see a ton of deferred maintenance now. And it doesn't matter where, whether it's in Arizona, California, there's deferred maintenance at all price levels. It's just because the cost of maintaining properties has gotten so expensive. So you could see someone saying, you know what, as they're reviewing their estate plan, you know what, and they're talking to their financial planner, their CPA, or maybe their trust attorney. They're saying, you know what, we need to, we need to rebalance our balance sheet. We need to figure out, we need to create some liquidity. So they might sell some property, sell a property, and then at the same time donate a property, just get it off the books, and then take advantage of a tax reasons. And also, they may just feel like I'm 85, 90 years old, and you know what, I don't want it anymore. I don't have any heirs. And I like music, so I'm going to give it to an organization that really caters to music. There's a lot of reasons why someone would do it, but I think you're going to see an uptick just because there's a lot of people that are going to be facing some unplanned expenses in the next few years with the cost of ownership.
When you get to that, I feel like that's a real important point. And again, I know insurability is going to be one of those issues. But you mentioned a little bit a moment ago about deferred maintenance.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming what you're just describing is that maintenance that's needed, that's been neglected for a period of time.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, especially if you have the same tenant in maybe a property, and let's just assume maybe that that tenant doesn't necessarily care for the property in the same way you would. And because of that, and maybe because there's two different standards of what kind of care you're asking for the property to receive, that over time, if neglected, these sorts of things can kind of pile up and become very expensive. So
Yes.
I would imagine that once you've seen a property and maybe you go into a property that somebody's saying, please sell this property, and then you give this whole line item of all these sorts of things that need to be worked on, because I know that, we didn't have a huge list with me, but we did have a list. And the things that needed to be taken care of had to be taken care of in order to maximize the sellability
Mhm.
of the property, which I'd imagine that's something you probably see pretty routinely.
Yeah, so you're going to see, we see a lot of roofs now that are at the end of their life cycle. Water heaters, or you see those all the time. Then my favorite, electrical panels that haven't been upgraded
We
in
had
40
both.
years. We see those a lot.
Okay.
But sewer lines too. Sewer lines, 15 years ago, we never really saw that many sewer line problems. 20 years ago, I mean, I don't even think I saw a sewer line problem. Now we see sewer line problems all the time. And it's just
Sewer
because
line
of
just
the age.
clogging up and just having like excessive amount of buildup. Is that what you mean?
Breaking.
Roots,
Oh,
growing in. And then like there's parts of LA, like they still have clay, they had clay pipes. We had one in like 7, 8 years ago in Glendale, and that thing was shot, and it was a clay pipe. And the guy goes, it's 70 years old. What do you expect?
yeah. I'm just curious how, let's say you receive a property that
Mhm,
somebody like a nonprofit has entrusted you to sell
mhm.
on their behalf. And then you come across, especially these older homes, and these older homes, obviously they're not up to code. There's a lot of things that have not been addressed. Maybe some of it has, if a remodel has taken place, and of course, the GFCI outlets are in the right place and making sure that it's all up to code. But then there are a lot of things that are missed that eventually gets kind of like found out by a homeowner inspector, and then it's like, oh, by the way, not only do you have termites, the termites are about to take over the world, and they're going to do it on your property first and foremost. Those types of issues. Can you share what maybe the average maintenance cost for a house, say under $1 million, would be? And I don't know if you have anything just off the top of your head,
Well,
but I'm curious what
I
we're
think
talking about.
we would address that up front. In other words, so we go to 123 Main Street. So, organization X contacts us and says, "Hey, look, we're thinking about taking this donation on 123 Main Street." We're like, "Okay, great." And I'm just going to talk about the physical verification right now. I won't get into, there's another component to it. So on the physical verification, we'll go, and we're not roofing experts, and we're not plumbing experts, and we're not electrical experts. We're not experts at any of that stuff. But you can kind of tell when a roof's been patched up 3 times, when it's got the 3 different layers on it. We've had that. We've had 4 layers actually. So you
Oh.
can tell, you can see that. You look at electrical panels and you can kind of say, oh, they're old. So we can kind of make like a little checklist, and we can go, you know what, Mr. Organization or Mrs. Organization, the property you took in, it's in a nice neighborhood. This is what it's roughly worth, but in its current condition, and if it's really on the bad side, it's ultimate. The ideal client for that property is going to be someone who's going to redevelop the property, who's going to go in there and repurpose it and redo the whole property. It's not going to be for the retail consumer who wants a turnkey house. Obviously, they're not going to buy it. So there's pricing issues. There's things that we can do to the pricing to accommodate for those repairs. Second thing that we would do is when they come in, we would tell the buyers, go ahead and do all your due diligence up front. Do all your inspections, satisfy any curiosity, anything you want to investigate, and submit your offer as a non-contingent offer once you've satisfied all your inspections. So we're not going to have it. So it's like, we don't really want to go into escrow with someone and then for $1 million and then them come back with a $200,000, a request for repairs.
Right.
I'd rather them know up front, get it out of their system and then write us an offer for 800, because that's the same number we're going to end up at. And there's less likelihood of the second scenario falling through than the first, because what'll happen is if they come in at $1 million and now you're starting to negotiate this and starting to negotiate that, the more times you're negotiating, it increases the probability of failure. Whereas you just go in and you say, I need a new roof. I need new sewer line. I need new this, and I need new that. Now, that's the model that we're in. That model, we're talking about a property that's kind of in distress condition, not financially, but just in the overall condition. If you get a property that's on the nicer side that's been donated, then we have a separate set of challenges, because we got to see where that property kind of falls within its marketplace. Is it the best house on the block or the best house in the neighborhood, or is it just like an 8 out of 10? And then we have to also price that accordingly, because at the same time, the nonprofit is not going to, if the marketing time on a specific property is 75 to 90 days, and we identify that up front, the last thing we want to be doing is holding out for an aggressive number and be on the market at 120 days. They would rather get their money in 60 days, if that makes sense. So we have to price according to the condition. But believe it or not, if the property is in terrible shape and it's priced correctly, it will sell fast. People love beat up, decrepit properties. They really do.
I guess that was definitely one of the questions that I had, is that there's a market for people who are buying distressed properties who are then raising the property, or, just gutting it out maybe and just leaving some structural elements there. But otherwise, there is a market for these individuals, and they come out of the woodwork in search of it then.
Huge market for it.
Okay. So it's a very interesting dynamic, because I think that I appreciate the fact that you are trying to mitigate the likelihood of a buyer getting out of a contract because things are shell-shocked to them in the period of inspection. Whereas you're sharing up front, these are all the disclosures, these are all the issues that we're well aware of, and you need to be mindful of this when you're looking at the property, so that they know, full eyes open, that what they're getting themselves into and not being surprised along the way.
It's a very similar model to what they use in the probate courts in Los Angeles County. And so the way that a lot of the probate agents bring their properties to market is they'll bring it to market, and they just basically tell them, they'll say, look, do all your due diligence, all your inspections, and when you come to submit your offer, you're going to release all contingencies. That's inspection, that's, everything, all the contingencies that you have to release, and you just move forward. The reason that is done is because there's a judge that's ultimately going to decide on the sale, probate sale. And he doesn't want to sit there and hear about, the Smith family not liking the color of the paint. And, there's a broken window. It's one of these kind of things that if you're buying that type of property, then, and believe it or not, the buyers in that space know the game. They know the rules of the game. This isn't something, a retail buyer may say this is pretty harsh and draconian here. However, the people that do this day in and day out for a living, they're used to the rules.
Yeah.
So it's like buying an REO at the courthouse. They bring their cash in hand and they close the transaction right then and there, because it's just the way it goes. So most of the time, if it's a fixer property, it's going to go to a developer or a flipper. And they have no problem doing inspections up front and then giving you their number of what they're willing to pay for it based on everything that they found.
Okay. That's really helpful. It does tell me that owning real estate is a lot of work. And
Yeah.
a lot of people might simply be tired of the work that so maybe they have built a lot of their wealth this way. However, down the road, eventually it can become very cumbersome for all sorts of different reasons that we've talked about and that are on the screen, and reasons that we haven't chatted about. I think it would be good for folks to be able to see, especially if they've never been in a transaction themselves. Maybe they haven't really done real estate even for themselves. Maybe they have never owned a property outright, but it gets a little bit involved, especially when it comes to the transaction of turning a real property into something that's going to afford them cash. And I think it's just good to be able to share a little bit about that process. Obviously, we understand escrow. We understand that escrow is in place for a specific purpose, but I'm wondering if you can kind of give the flyover view as to what a transaction involves, so that people understand that real estate, just because you're getting real estate, doesn't mean that things are just honky-dory just yet. So tell us a little bit about the transaction process.
So a foundation will take in a property, and let's just say it's in an HOA. So as a part of the HOA, there's going to be, there's going to be rules and restrictions. Okay. Um, we would like to know before we go to market that property, for instance, is there a special assessment coming in that community? Because that's going to affect the price of the property. And right now we've seen them 30, we saw one like 2 years ago, $36,000 special assessment.
Are you
Let's
talking
just
about
say,
Melrose? Is that
pardon me?
like a
No, it has
Melrose?
nothing to do with Melrose. It just has, a lot of it has to do with deferred maintenance again. We're back at deferred maintenance, but a lot of times the HOAs, they kind of kick the can down the road. We know of another deal right now where the HOA wasn't maintaining the chimneys very well. And when our client got into it, the HOA has to repair 3 chimneys now. So, but
So a special assessment would be an extra bill that a homeowner has to pay to cover expenses for the homeowners association. So say they have to re-roof the whole building, but they don't have enough money in their funds, like their regular working funds. They go to all the homeowners and say, okay, we have to replace the roof on the building. It's going to be $300,000. So everyone is going to pay $10,000 or
Is that
whatever.
like in a condo situation?
Yeah.
Most likely. Or do you, I mean, single family homes, you probably don't see that very often.
No, not the special assessments, but they do like they would still be maybe in an HOA where I guess what Javier was probably getting towards was when a foundation comes to us and says, we took in this donation, then we start the due diligence process, which would involve getting if it's in an association, getting the governing documents, the CC&Rs, see if there's anything hiding in there that might come back to bite us. Obviously, we do all of our diligence, doing the research on the market, where it's located, going in, taking a look at it, seeing if there is anything that might need to be fixed before it goes to market. If there's something glaringly obvious that's going to have a huge effect on the transaction. Otherwise, we don't typically have the foundations spending money up front. What else? We go there. We obviously send our pricing suggestion. A lot of the times they already have an appraisal, but they've been wildly wrong before.
lately too.
So we'll take the appraisal, but we'll obviously do our standard real estate comparative market analysis, right?
Are you saying that like an appraisal will come back to you or
And
come
it'll just be
and
awful.
what,
They
what
use
oh my gosh. So
all
tell
the
me,
wrong,
yeah, what does
all
that
the wrong
mean?
data, or the appraiser, sometimes it's a drive-by appraisal, so they didn't actually go in the property, which makes a huge difference because
Yeah.
they're assuming what the condition is on the inside. So we've actually had to contest appraisals before, particularly in a probate situation, because they do drive-bys. So they just assume that the interior either looks fine or that maybe it's really bad, but they don't know. So we had one that was off by over $100,000, and we told the attorney that was involved that they needed to either redo it and actually go in the property, or we couldn't list it for that price because no one would buy the property. It was so wildly overpriced. So what we did was we sent them photos and videos from inside the property, and the appraiser actually revised the price based on that. Because we said, okay, it's not 650, it's 400. There's no way.
I'd imagine the appraiser was feeling a little bit sheepish after
Yeah.
that. So, okay, I'm just curious because I think this is really good as well, is that in many cases, organizations that are receiving real estate gifts are having donors do their own or having them hire their own appraiser to come in and act and provide that appraisal.
Mhm.
What could possibly go wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't stress how important it is for an organization. You know, the donor's going to come to you and say, you know what, Mr. Gift Officer, Mrs. Gift Officer, my property's worth X. And then they're all going to get excited. But you really want to do that due diligence up front to determine what if X is really X or if it's really Y or Z. And then at that point, you know what you're getting yourself into as an organization. Because I think that the skepticism that some organizations have in receiving gifts is, you know, I mean, they always talk about liability. I mean, but thousands of houses sell across this country every day, and you know, there's not thousands of lawsuits filed every day. I think it's more just of not understanding what it is they're getting, or it's outside of their area. So it's really important before they say yes, we're going to take it, to really do a full assessment on the property, know what they're getting into. You know, even down to the data metrics of, you know, what's the days on market, what's the, you know, what's the absorption rate for that current market. Those are all key numbers, because if it's a 90-day sales cycle that a person's going to, anyone that is going to take this home and put it on the market, they have to budget that 90 days. That means they're going to have 90 days of HOA if there's an HOA. They're going to have 90 days of home insurance. They have 90 days of garbage, utilities, etc., that they're on the hook for till it closes. Now, granted, if you're getting a house that's worth $1 million and you're going to spend maybe a couple $1,000s on utilities and all that aforementioned items, sure, it's a good deal. But it's you know, you have to go into it with, you know, with open eyes and realize that, you know, when you get this gift, I mean, I think one of the most important things to know is what's the sales cycle? How long is the days on market? Because a lot of markets now have adjusted to a normal. It's not the go-go days of COVID where things were selling, you know, 20 offers in one afternoon. It's going to be, you know, a lot of markets are 75 to 90 days. And, you know, that's not the end of the world. You know, everyone's like, oh, how long's it been on the market? Well, I wouldn't get concerned. If the market's 90 days, it's 90 days. You know, that's what it's typically. It might sell in 20 and it might sell in 110. But typically,
Curious about the appraisal though. How do you guide a nonprofit to take, or maybe to take the appraisal that's been given with a grain of salt?
well, I'll use one for example. Here's a real life example. There was an appraisal that was given to a nonprofit, and I'm gonna make the numbers up so they don't know what I'm talking about them. But they got an appraisal for 450. Okay. And they were all dead set on this 450 number. And they engaged us, and we collaborated with our office in Houston. And we had an agent on the ground there, and she knew that area really well. And so I sent her the appraisal, and she looked at the appraisal, and she goes, "Oh, this appraisal is not worth salt." And I go, "Why?" And she goes, "Because this is the house that the client took in and that accepted as a gift, a single level. All the houses in this appraisal, 3 of 5 were double level, 2-story, and they were in a different neighborhood." So it's pretty easy to kind of figure that one out. Although we did sell it for right at appraised value. Those are
But
just,
the initial pricing was a lot less
yes.
because the comps in the appraisal report were not close enough to what this house was. There's a big difference in value between a single level and a 2-story.
Yeah.
Things like a pool. If the appraiser doesn't really know the area and they're comparing things, oh, it's within a mile, but it's in a completely different type of area.
Mhm.
Or just, I mean, environmental factors. There's so many things that really we just have those difficult conversations with the gift officer or their board, and we say, look, you got this. The appraisal should really be used as kind of an estimate for what they could possibly expect to get from the property. But the realtor is really the boots on the ground in the situation, and they know that property value fluctuates based on more than just what the house down the street sold for 3 months ago. And so we get very detailed in our analysis with to be able to explain, okay, the appraisal was for 800,000, but we need to price this at 749, and this is why. And we just lay it out.
And there's some very good appraisers out there that do some very good work. I'm not trying to throw them all under the bus. I'm just saying that typically when you have an appraisal that's just done for an estimated value for time of death or for, for this type of situation, they're not as meticulous, or like for a cash transaction that doesn't have financing attached to it. You're going to see more errors in those types of appraisals than you would if the bank's ordering it, because the bank's going to have a review. Someone's going to review it, and like I said, I'm not saying that they're doing anything malicious. I'm just saying that typically someone gets an order, they drive by a neighborhood, they're going to just go through it pretty quickly.
So an appraiser is not necessarily doing comps. They're not necessarily.
They pull comps. They pull properties in the area. It's just you want to have you want to have properties that are similar. So to have a 2-story comparing with a 1-story, that's a stretch.
And when a lender is doing it on a regular real estate transaction, those appraisers typically ask the realtors involved, what houses did you use when you listed this property? What comps did you use? Is there something that you want to make sure that I use in my report? And we'll send them the information, and we'll say, we use this one because it's right around the corner and it's the same floor plan, which they may not know. And it's this and it's that. And don't use this one because that was a distressed sale and they fire sold it and they took a lowball offer from the We Buy Homes for Cash guy or what have you, which that wasn't a standard sale. It wasn't marketed the way that you traditionally would. And so don't use that one. It's really low for a reason. So there's things that a traditional appraiser would do for like a bank appraisal. But if you just call Bob the appraiser and say, can you come appraise my house? There's just things that are missed in a situation like that if you're in a traditional real estate transaction, they would do. And I guess there's more care put into it.
Yeah. That makes sense to me because we're talking about, look, you know what, if it's a mortgage bank or a broker that is floating me a loan, they're going to want to make sure that they're doing their due diligence on the value of the home to make sure that they're not getting themselves into hot water.
Yeah.
So they're going to probably exhibit a little bit more care in the process, making sure the appraisal is done.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Well, yeah. And like we were involved with a situation a few years ago where the donor gave an estimated value to the organization and said, I have this property. I think it's worth $1 million or whatever it was. And because of that, because I'm going to donate $1 million to you, I want my name on this building. And first, the value that he gave them was highly inaccurate.
Was it under or over?
It was over what, of course. And the organization said, well, but for $1 million donation, we don't give names on buildings.
Yeah.
So his expectations all around were just wrong. So it's like sometimes like you have to manage the expectations of the donors also, because some of them might not just be doing it to be a good person. They want the notoriety that comes along with it. And if they can't get a certain amount of that, they may not do the donation. So or they have specific tax planning needs where if the value is at a certain level, it's not worth it to them to donate it.
Yeah.
And they'd rather just sell it and take the money and do something else, or they're going to do a 1031 exchange and buy another asset or something else. So the value, yes, it's very important, but it could blow a whole gift if it's not the right value also.
Yeah, you're opening up such an important thing about problem properties. And the problem properties you had just said it, maybe not all donors are altruistic. I would question if anybody is altruistic, really, but that's
Yeah.
another discussion for a philosophy class. As it relates to donations, I think problem properties, in other words, I've got this problem of a property that I don't know what to do with. Let me give it to an organization, make it their problem,
Mm-hmm.
and and now try to at least get some sort of valued write-off, or maybe even trade a gift for income and do a charitable remainder trust in exchange for that property. When at the end of the day, organizations that either do not have bylaws in this space at all, and I recommend having some bylaws that are in place to receiving real estate gifts. That's an important thing. But even those that may not necessarily be willing or knowledgeable to do the due diligence that you speak of, they might be receiving a real nasty situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and for such an example, we have balconies. And this is something, Javier, that you spoke to that was like, I had no idea. And these are not single family home balconies, but these are balconies in larger complexes. How does that work?
Three or more units. And what it is California passed a law that requires the HOA or the governing body of a building to perform an inspection, not them, they have to have a structural engineer perform an inspection of the balconies to see how structurally sound they are. And there's a lot of them that aren't structurally sound. So they're getting hit with assessments to remediate and repair them and get them so that they're functional. But that costs money. So you could see a situation where somebody knows it's coming, and that would be in those HOA documents we talked about in the beginning, that hey, you know what, everyone's balcony is going to cost 20,000, 50,000, whatever that number may be. But that is an issue that obviously the seller or the recipient of that property, if they were to take it, that's something they're going to have to take on that expense, or they have to adjust the price accordingly for the buyer that's going to buy it, because if they're going to have to pay for it, then it's going to be reflected in the ultimate purchase price. But we're starting to, like, driving here today, we drove by a building that was their balconies were all being repaired.
Yeah, I would imagine that. Here you are, paying a visit to Chateau Noir, and Chateau Noir has been a condo complex that was built in the late 60s and may not necessarily be up to the standard that code would require today. And let's say somebody is donating that particular property to organization XYZ that doesn't necessarily know the balcony up to code, remediation,
Mm-hmm.
rules. What would you tell them, and how does that kind of translate
We
into?
would find out right in that initial due diligence period.
Yeah.
That's something we would find out. So I mean, if they're our client, they're not gonna, I mean, we're not gonna go in and take it and then say, oh, by the way, you got to do the balcony.
Yeah,
We'll know about the balcony right up front, just because.
They can ask the HOA if the inspections have already been performed or if it's scheduled. Problem is that they kept pushing out the deadline for when all of these buildings need to be done. And the real issue is there are thousands and thousands of condo units in California, and there aren't thousands and thousands of structural engineers that can do the inspections.
Right.
And the inspections are expensive. It takes a lot of time because you have to inspect every single balcony. And then if there is work that needs to be done, that cost can just skyrocket. And if the HOA doesn't have the funds in reserve, they have to go back to the owners. And so if we at least know, yes, they've done the inspection or no, they haven't, do they expect there to be issues? Like, are there already known issues? Have any of the balconies failed before? Are they keeping up with their termite work? Do they check the building? Do they perform wood replacement? Or is it going to be a huge, huge issue going forward? So, but that would be, so we would figure that out along with other things in the HOA docs or the meeting minutes from the latest meeting, HOA meetings. Just are there any big assessments coming in the future for any other issues that they might know about? Do they have to paint the building? Do they have reserves? Because that also affects the financing. So can you even get a traditional mortgage on the condo? If there's too many renters in the building, you can't do a traditional Fannie or Freddie mortgage, and you have to do private lending, which has higher interest, non-QM loans. So there's a lot of things about condos that can really come back to bite you. You want to make sure that a buyer can get financing. Otherwise, the price has got to be a lot lower to get a cash buyer.
It's really interesting. I wasn't intending to necessarily go down the condo road today, but I'm really glad that we're doing this. To me, this is because you're right. There are, I don't know how many condos in California living, but probably a lot.
A lot.
And just with the condominium issues that come from those assessments that are being levied because maybe they don't have the money to support it. Nobody anticipated needing that kind of money for all the balcony repairs or the roof repairs or whatever because of maybe cost or for that matter, maybe the condo association was really minimal in terms of what they were collecting or whatever the issue is. But I would imagine that if I am receiving a property, let's say it's a condominium, that's worth, say, $650,000 for a simple condominium and somewhere, I don't know if that's fair or not.
Mm-hmm.
But then I see these assessments that are being levied against the buyer or the seller to make sure that they are properly repairing and doing everything that they need to do in order to get it up to code. What kind of expense? I mean, just I know it's like, well, that depends, Andy, and it depends on what we're talking about, if it's a balcony or whatever. But I mean, are you seeing some sort of common expense or range of expenses that are going into condominium repairs
The last assessment we saw was 35,000.
okay.
And that was, I don't remember how many units were in that building, but that was to replace a bunch of siding, repaint, re-roof, I think, because that association just had not, I don't think they had ever
Raise
done
their dues.
they weren't raising their dues, but they also weren't doing preventative maintenance. So it was like 40 years of never painting. And then the siding was absorbing water because it had peeling paint. And then the siding was rotting and the roofs needed for it was
Not well
everything was
managed.
kind of hitting at once.
Yeah, not well managed because
Yeah.
housing stuff breaks, man. That's what happens.
Hmm. Yeah. And then the bad thing about that one was they voted on the assessment because with an assessment of that size, you have to get buy-in from all the owners. And the owners voted no, that they didn't want the assessment, which of course no one wants a $35,000 bill.
Right.
But the HOA actually said, we don't care that you said no. We are now going to do everything within our legal power to get the money however we can,
Right.
which meant doing small assessments every like 6 months. You're allowed to do them without voting as long as they're under a certain dollar amount. So they basically said, we're going to come after the money in smaller bite-sized pieces. And once we get all of the money, then we'll do the work. And then they said they were also going to raise the monthly dues amount by the maximum allowable without a vote. So they basically said we're still doing it because if they don't do the work, the property values were going to plummet. The building was going to basically it was going to become like a shanty town.
Right.
Like you can't not do the work, and everyone's roofs are leaking, and there's mold, and no one can live in their condos. So they just took matters into their own hands.
I can imagine only the liability that would occur because of the neglect and the fact that they have
Yeah,
left it be.
yeah.
And then the
So
homeowner saying, "How dare you?" It's
yeah,
like,
well, and that affected the financeability of that whole association because of the impending assessment and the unknowns as far as how much the dues were actually going to be within the next year. And so you couldn't really finance it because the banks were so afraid of the unknown numbers.
hmm.
So it's like that. There's so much we could do a whole episode just on condos and
Well, you're
associations.
right, and I think we probably frightened a lot of our gift officers today. So, um, but honestly, Cassie, Javier, we're wrapping it up. And we
So
didn't even get into our presentation, or not much, but this is so awesome, and I'm hoping it would be okay. And I'm actually recording this, so you have to say yes. And that is that we have you back, and we do this again soon.
No, we can do part two, and we just discussed some of the challenges that you see in California, but there's challenges in Arizona too. Everyone's got their challenges. It's just a different set of challenges. And there's, like I said, there's issues with water, there's issues with solar, there's issues with insurance. And yeah, those really should be addressed. But to sum it up, if you know everything up front and you know what to expect, there's no reason to be scared of most gifts.
yes,
Okay. Actually, and if they're really banged up, I wouldn't be afraid of those either. I can show you pictures of places that look like war zones and ended up with 50 offers. So it's not necessarily, it's just, you really just have to know what you're getting yourself into. And then once you know, it's pretty smooth. It's
Or
people
at
are
least,
surprises.
I'm just saying, or at least know somebody who can do this on your behalf,
Yeah.
exactly. Just
not
call
just
it.
you guys. So, well, I want to just say thank you for joining me today. And again, I would like to do this again for part two, and
Okay.
Absolutely.
I hope that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. If you don't mind, why don't you guys just hang on for just a little bit? I'm going to push the pause button on the recording, and
Sure.
and then I'll say goodbye to everybody. So goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time. Okay.